Hello everyone, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this video lecture on COVID-19 challenges and opportunities. The title of the lecture might sound something different. The main aim of this lecture is to give a different perspective, that is, how to see opportunities in terms of challenging situations. Before getting into the lecture, I would like to introduce myself. I am Dr. Vinod Kumar, working as Assistant Professor in School of Life Sciences, BSc Crescent Institute of Science and Technology. I would like to start this lecture with the question: can the world ever be COVID-19 free? Hope you had some self-reflections. We will get back to this question and answer at the end of this presentation. Let's go through the outline of the presentation. First, I will be introducing to COVID-19. Then we will be addressing the need to fight against this COVID-19. First, we will be addressing these prevention methods, where we will be dealing different vaccine platforms that are being developed to fight against this COVID-19. Then the diagnosis methods which are currently practiced. Then finally we'll get on to this treatment, where we'll be dealing about the different drugs. Finally we end the lecture with conclusion and future prospects. COVID-19, it's an acronym that stands for Coronavirus Disease, which occurred in 2019. The acronym is given by World Health Organization on February 11, 2020. Actually, this is an acronym which is given as a COVID-19, which is caused by the particular virus SARS-CoV-2. The expansion for this SARS-CoV-2 is Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2. Let's see the overview about the coronaviruses. It belongs to the family of Coronaviridae. The virus is viewed under the electron microscope. There are drone-like appearances are present on the surface. It is because of the presence of surface glycoproteins. So the Coronaviridae family contains two subfamilies. The first one is Ditovirinae and the second one is Orthocoronaviridae. We are going to focus only on this Orthocoronaviridae, which belongs to this genera Alpha coronavirus, Beta coronavirus, Gamma coronavirus, and finally Delta coronavirus. Let's see about the coronaviruses that causes infections in the humans. Till date, only 7 coronaviruses are known to cause infections in humans, out of which 4 causes only common cold, whereas the rest of the 3 cause more pathogenic effects in the humans. Let's focus on this common cold causing pathogens first. First, two types of alpha coronaviruses are 229E and NL63, which belongs to the family of alpha coronaviruses. The rest of the two, it belongs to beta coronaviruses, which are OC43 and HKU1. Let's move on to the much more pathogenic effect causing coronaviruses. The first one is SARS-CoV-1, second one is MERS-CoV, which expands Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus, and finally the COVID-19 causing SARS-CoV-2. All these three kind of pathogenic things belongs to beta coronaviruses. Let's see the structure of your SARS-CoV-2 virus. It possesses a single-stranded RNA which contains a nucleocapsid, along which is enclosed in the membrane. So along this membrane we have the spikes which are present on the surface of your membrane. So these spikes are made up of the proteins, as you can see in the diagrams, which are much more enlarged. So we can see that it contains your receptor binding protein as well as your angiotensin covering enzyme 2 receptors. So if we focus upon these spike proteins, if we compare your SARS-CoV-2 as well as your SARS-CoV-1, it shares around 76 to 78 percentage in the genetic sequencing, whereas the rest of the percentage it's going to be totally different. So that's why we can't say whatever the vaccine that works with SARS-CoV-1 won't works with the SARS-CoV-2. We need to develop a new vaccines as well as the antiviral which are more effective on the SARS-CoV. As we all know, SARS, MERS and COVID-19, these are zoonotic disease. That is, it starts from these animals and then it spreads among these animals. Then it transmits from animals to the people. Because of this zoonotic transmission and subsequent adaptation to human, several RNA viruses are being emerging. And it causes infection to the people. Because of that, it affects at the global level. So this adaptation, why it happens? It's majorly because of the high mutations and recombination rate that happens in the RNA viruses. These kind of high mutations and recombinations, it won't be possible in terms of your DNA viruses. Only in your RNA viruses, these kind of recombination rate will be much more higher. So that's why RNA viruses are being emerged, particularly coronaviruses, which causes a huge hurdle as well as a burden to the current scenario. In order to overcome these drawbacks which are caused due to this COVID-19, this research and development targets on three major areas. The first one is on the diagnosis, where it needs to be better as well as faster. That means whatever the diagnosis method that you're applying to the patients, it must be reliable. At the same time, it needs to be accessible by all the people, both in terms of the developed countries as well as the developing countries as well as your underdeveloped countries. And then we also need to have the medicines which are completely novel, and it's also possible that we can reposition some of the medicines which are effective in COVID-19 disease. And finally, we must have a new vaccines, thereby we can prevent the disease to the humans. So the need is crystal clear. We need to have novel technologies to fight against emerging coronaviruses in terms of prevention as well as the diagnosis and then the treatment. First, let's focus on the prevention, that is the vaccines. Vaccines, the lifesavers. WHO stated that nearly 2 to 3 million human deaths are saved because of successful vaccination. This number can further improve to 4.5 million if this worldwide vaccination coverage have improved. In 1979, smallpox was officially declared to be eliminated. Similarly, in 2011, a livestock disease, rinderpest, is officially announced to be eliminated from this book. Similarly, measles and polio viruses are close to elimination. Several other diseases are also under control due to successful vaccination program around the world. Despite of this noteworthy success, we don't have effective vaccines for several many diseases. That's why novel strategies are being developed to elicit therapeutic as well as your prophylactic immune responses. So what we mean here by therapeutic as well as the prophylactic is the vaccines which are given before the disease occurs, whereas the therapeutic vaccines which is given after the disease occurs, where your immune system is induced to fight against a particular disease. In order to develop the vaccine, first we need to understand the concept of vaccine immunology. So let's get into a little bit of the immunology. So let's consider this is the immune system, and we are considering at two levels. What happens if your body is subjected to the pathogen entry, and what happens when you have vaccinated. So when a pathogen enters into the body, what happens is that your immune response is going to be induced. If your immune response is much more higher means, then you can possibly recover from this particular disease. If your immune response doesn't quite goes quite well, means possibly can lead to any kind of disability in your body, or you can possibly die. But in both the cases, it's possible that some amount of immune memory will be present in your body. So when you're vaccinated, same like your pathogen infection, you're also going to have this immune memory. At the same time, you're going to be get rid of this pathogen. Now we can get into this much more deeper. We're going to focus upon the immune cells. Immune cells, these are the soldiers to fight against the pathogen entry. So we have the epithelial barrier, which are going to be your innate immunity. So when a pathogen appears outside your body, and then it can interact with the epithelial barrier, it's possible that it can penetrate into your body. Subsequently, your immune cells is going to be recruited at the site of infections. So these cells, macrophages, neutrophil, NK cells, it's going to act as your innate immune cells. Whereas your dendritic cells, it serves as a bridge between innate as well as your adaptive immunity. So this dendritic cell, it can present the antigen to the CD8 positive cytotoxic T cells. It's also possible that this dendritic cell, it can is antigen to the T cells, or it can activate your CD4 T cells. So let's see the difference between your innate immunity as well as the adaptive immunity, so that we will get an idea which type of immunity gives a vaccine effect. So your innate immunity is going to be the inborn immunity. That is, when you are born, at the time itself you are going to have this kind of immunity. Whereas your adaptive immunity, it slowly develops upon this any kind of viral infection as well as the other kind of infections. When we get into this kinetics, your innate immunity is going to be much more faster when comparing to your adaptive immunity. But the duration of action is less for the innate, whereas it's going to be more for your adaptive immunity. It's because of your memory response that are being elicited in terms of your adaptive immunity. In addition to the memory response, it also is going to be much more specific, because your B cells and the T cells have a specific receptors which is going to act upon your disease. As in case of innate immunity, that's not the case. So in which more the self-discrimination is going to be more for adaptive immunity. Let's see about this functionality, because now we saw that like several kind of immune cells is going to be elicited, how it's going to play a role. As we saw, we begin to have these antigen presenting cells which elicit the cytotoxic T cells. So at the same time, it can also activate your helper cells. You can see here, to make this diagram much more simpler, what happens here is like your cytotoxic T cells is going to kill this intracellular pathogens. That is, if the pathogen, if it's get into your body and it needs the host molecular mechanism in order to replicate. Thereby, if you reduce your cytotoxic T cell, it can possibly kill this reservoir of your viral infection. Thereby, no infection happens inside the body. As if we have this antibodies which is developed due to this plasma cells, here your T cells, it can be differentiated in the plasma cells which produces your antibodies. So these antibodies, it attaches with your extracellular pathogens and it neutralizes. When the antibodies, when it binds to a particular pathogen, it will be eliminated from the body. So if you activate your immune system, it can possibly induce the types of cytotoxic T cells or even antibodies. The cytotoxic T cells, it kills the reservoir of the infection itself, whereas your antibodies, it can eliminate this extracellular pathogens. And it's the case, same like we have this epithelial barrier. Then if you are vaccinated, your vaccine enters into the body. Same like there, your immune cells is going to be recruited. We have the B cells, it's going to produce the antibodies, and then this antibody is going to bind upon this pathogen and then it will be eliminated. Whereas when the dendritic cells, if it presents this antigens with cytotoxic T cells, it can possibly act upon the infected cells. In case of cancer, so you can use a vaccine where you face a cure. Let's look upon the traditional vaccine strategies. Louis Pasteur invented vaccines from the weakened microorganism in 1865. That means we have a normal pathogen, we are subjecting it to inactivation in terms of the heat or chemical. Or you can possibly attenuate it by repeated culturing of a particular pathogen. The virulence might be much lesser. That way it can act as an antigen. So here we have the examples for inactivated vaccines. The examples are going to be a polio as well as hepatitis. As for influenza, measles, mumps, rubella, where attenuated vaccine strategies can help to elicit a particular immune response. Despite of this advantage, it has its limitations. The main limitation is that it can spontaneously reverse back to this pathogenicity. addition to that, it cannot be applied to the deadly diseases such as the cancer, and then we can't apply this to this immunocompromised person, because instead of actually making them protect from the particular disease, it's possible that they might get into other kind of risks. So let's look into this possible vaccine platforms that are being existed. So the traditional vaccine platforms are live attenuated vaccines, inactivated vaccines, and the subunit vaccines. The model vaccine strategies are DNA vaccines, RNA vaccines. That means the disease-specific antigens will be encoded in this DNA as well as the RNA, and then your immune response are elicited. In case of a nanoparticles, it can be your DNA, RNA, or protein or peptide that can be more formulated in terms of the nanoparticles. So when it is injected into this body, it will be much more efficiently taken up by your antigen presenting cells. And finally, we have this viral vector based vaccines, where it's going to be this components which is taken by the viral, where the amplification rate of this encoded antigen will be much more higher in comparison to this. Several vaccines are being developed against COVID-19, out of which only few vaccines are efficient in preclinical studies and stepped on to clinical trial stage 1. So here we're going to see one by one. First one is going to be your mRNA based vaccine. Here the mRNA is transcribed in vitro method. So the vaccine candidate is named as mRNA 1273. Here this in vitro transcribed mRNA vaccine encoded for your spike protein. So these spike proteins are going to be present on the surface of your virus. So this vaccine is being developed by the Moderna, which is going to be a clinical stage biotech company. The next one is going to be your adenovirus vector based vaccines. So normally these viral vectors, it's going to be much efficient in delivering this genetic information, because this viral vectors is modified in such a way that its structural as well as your self-replicating things, or it's being removed from the viral thing, and then it's going to be getting into this host. So it's not going to be pathogenic, only whatever the information which you are going to give into this thing, it's going to be much more effective. So here also this adenovirus, it encodes for your S protein, and it's being developed by CanSino Biologics. Next one is going to be plasmid DNA. So unlike your viral vector, here it's only going to be a plasmid DNA. So what's the difference between that one, the viral one, and this plasmid DNA? Is comparatively this one is safer when comparing to this one. But when we compare this plasmid DNA with your in vitro transcript mRNA, your in vitro transcript mRNA is going to be safer. Why? Because is that your mRNA is going to be transient in expression, whereas your DNA is going to be stronger. In addition to that, your plasmid DNA, it can possibly cause insertional mutagenesis. So this plasmid DNA is being developed by Inovia Pharmaceuticals. Next one is going to be your artificial antigen presenting cells. As we saw in vaccine immunology, your antigen presenting cells is capable of eliciting this T cells as well as your B cells response. Thereby it gives to your antibodies which targets on the extracellular pathogens. At the same time, this APCs is going to activate your cytotoxic T cells, and that cytotoxic T cell is going to act on the reservoir of your particular virus. So here this APC is modified with the lentiviral vector, and then these domains are selected viral proteins. So in this artificial antigen presenting cell, the surface of your cells. So here it won't be actual cell, it will be your beads or any kind of a nanostructure which are being surface modified with your antigen as well as your co-stimulatory molecules. What happens if you don't have this co-stimulatory molecules is only your antigen will be presented to your T cells, which leads to the energy. That means no immunity will be induced. Only if you have this co-stimulatory molecules associated with your antigen presentation, it leads to this activation of your antigen specific T cell responses. This kind of technology is being tested for COVID-19 by Shenzhen Geno Immune Medical Institute. And then comes your modified dendritic cells. So this is going to be an actual dendritic cell itself. This dendritic cells, it will be modified with the lentiviruses which encodes for the synthetic mini genes. So here this cells, dendritic cells, it's being co-administered with antigen specific type 2 cytotoxic T cells. In your previous case, your artificial antigen presenting cells, it activates your B cell as well as a cytotoxic T cells. Whereas here your DCs, it will be co-administered with your antigen specific cytotoxic cells. That means your vaccine formulation, it's going to contain your cells, actual cells, contains both your dendritic cells as well as your antigen specific cytotoxic T cells. This is being developed by Shenzhen Geno Immune Medical Institute. Next we can move to this diagnosis. So currently PCR based tests are widely used for your COVID-19, as we all know. So the basic principle behind this is being described in the another video lecture. If you are being interested, please go through it in the same channel of us. So this works by amplifying the viral genetic material of the virus, thereby it's specifically detecting the presence of a virus by itself. Here this COVID-19 RT-PCR test for the qualitative detection of the nucleic acid from SARS-CoV-2. That means we need to isolate a sample from the patient in the upper and lower respiratory specimen, and then this RNA, it will be reverse transcribed into cDNA, and then it will be amplified. So when it is amplified, it gives the fluorescent signal. According to the intensity of this fluorescent signal, we can get to know whether this RNA which is present in the virus is present in the particular patients or not. So if the intensity is much lower, means then we are sure that the viral RNA is not present and the person is free from the disease. So this RT-PCR method, it's going to be highly reliable. But the problem is that it requires a laboratory setup. So it won't be a point of care diagnostics. That means in case of your underdeveloped as well as the developing countries, this is going to be not that much practically feasible. So what we need is a point of care technologies or methods where the testing, it can be done immediately. So your serological test, it paves a way for it, where we are going to test this antibodies which are being used against a particular virus. So that means here we are going to test the presence of the antibodies which are used against a particular virus. So as we saw in the beginning, where you saw this immunology, where when the pathogen enters into the body, it's going to induce this antibodies against that particular disease, right? So when it enters, the antibody is also going to be present in the human body. So in this diagnostic test, it's going to test for the antibodies. So thereby we will get to know whether the patient has this disease or not. So the drawback associated with this test is going to be effectiveness, because at first when the patient is infected with the disease, your IgM is going to be developed in a period of time. Then after 2 to 3 weeks, then your IgG antibodies is going to be present. So it may take some time to develop these antibodies, so it might get false results. So that's why on this serological test, it should not be used as a sole basis for diagnosis COVID-19. In case if we have a strong technology by immunochromatography and nanoparticle based method, then the sensitivity can be improved. But at the same time, we need to make sure that the confirmatory test is being done in order to make sure that the particular person is free from COVID-19. Next we can move on to the treatment methods. We have several drugs. First one is going to be antiviral drugs. The first one is going to be remdesivir, so which is going to be antiviral nucleoside analog drug from Gilead Sciences. So this remdesivir, it's going to be highly prioritized by WHO. So this one is going to be being tested with 1,000 patients, both both mild and severe COVID-19 patients are being tested. So here two dosing regimes are being followed. The first one is the 5 days one, and the second one is going to be 10 days one. We are going to wait for this one and how it's going to work in the future. and the other one is going to be a vasodilator. So what happens is vasodilator is it's going to widen the blood vessels. So as because the virus infection is going to be happening, there's a possibility that several blood clots are it's going to be present. So other drugs it's going to be associated with the vasodilators so that your blood flow it won't be stopped and then the heart attack, cardiac arrest it won't be happening. So it can also be associated with several corticosteroids so that drugs it reduces the inflammation. And then several immune modulators can also help to stimulate your immune responses to attack the infection. So that means one or more antiviral drugs need to be given to the patients in order to make the treatment works much more effective. Now there's going to be the trend where they're talking about this chloroquine, so which comes under the malarial drug. So why this chloroquine is majorly what the topic is that in 2005 SARS-CoV-1 which is being which was an outbreak at the time when they used this chloroquine as well as your hydroxychloroquine, they saw that the virus spread is being minimized. So that's why it's being a trend and the doctors around the world are trying the chloroquine as well as the hydroxychloroquine to check against the COVID-19. However, we know that there's going to be differences between your COVID SARS-CoV-1 as well as the SARS-CoV-2, but still clinicians are checking the evidences behind the potential of these drugs. In addition to that, monoclonal antibodies are also being tested. Thereby, if we have a successful one, then the antibodies by itself we can neutralize your. To conclude, viral outbreaks are inevitable. We need to be prepared to fight against the diseases. To answer to the question that we saw in the beginning, the fight against COVID-19 has already begun. What is your role to combat COVID-19?